guys, how's it going? It's Amanda, and welcome to the episode that will finally tell all my opinions on the most recent episode of the Sanders Side. So, we have an adventure to go through. This episode was nuts. Like, I have so many ideas on this. This episode's been out, what, 6 days now, maybe? I don't actually remember. But pretty much, I have talked to so many people online. I have talked to CJ, I have talked to my brother about it a little bit. It's nuts, okay? This episode blew me away in so many different ways, especially with how many times I've rewatched it now. Like, going over my notes, I've rewatched this episode at least 5 or 6 times, and that's watching it slowly, like line by line, and analyzing it, because that's how nuts I am. But anyway, so here are my final thoughts on selfishness versus selfishness versus selflessness. And my kitty is being a little butthead right now. What are you doing? Do you want to say hi to the people? This is Dot, and she is always the cheerleader in the background. Hi. You gonna lay on the bed and be a good kitty while Mama does her theorizing stuff? Yeah, I love you too. Okay. The kitty will probably not be in here for the entire video, because once I start talking and doing stuff, she likes to do that. Especially when I shut the door and she can't leave. God, if I start talking, are you gonna keep this up? I don't know. She might not. But either way, let us continue, shall we? Okay, so I've got a couple rules of thumb that we're gonna go over real quick. Okay, number one, you'll notice CJ's not here with me. Like I said in the last video at the end, in the little text on screen, CJ won't be in this video. They're kind of taking a break from everything. Work's been kind of stressful for them, so we're just gonna, they're here in spirit, trust me. I have talked their ear off about this episode and how much things I notice every time I watch it again, so trust me. CJ is here in spirit. Number two, this is very, very hella important. All of this is strictly my opinion. I know absolutely nothing about the way the Sanders Side is going. I know absolutely jack diddly, so this is all heavily opinionated. Please don't take anything I say in this offensively. Obviously I'm going to be talking a lot about Deceit. If Deceit is a character that triggers you in any sort of way, please don't watch this video, because I might be talking about arguably good things that he does in this episode, so I don't want that to trigger you, so please don't watch my theory video. But other than that, let's do this. Okay. So, thoughts for the entire video, and you're going to see me be looking down a lot because I'm going to be accessing my notes on my computer. So, first thing we're going to talk about is just the video as a whole. The episode as a whole is just so good. Like, there's just so many different things good about it that I can't even, name them all off in a single paragraph. But it's just, it does a lot of different things, and I think that has to do with the fact that we have a lot of new writers on the show. We have Quinn and Ari and a lot of other people that have started to help Joan and Thomas with the series, which I think is good, because we get more interesting ideas, because while character Thomas is one person, seeing different people's perspectives and experiences built into this one character makes the sides feel more real, and it makes us able to see ourselves in them a lot easier, and I think that's very important overall in the grand scheme of things. And then you also have, it's a little bit confusing. It's kind of what's the true purpose of Deceit? What is his real purpose of being there in this entire episode? Is it about the fact that, is it about the callback? Is it about the wedding? What is it really about? And that's what we're going to go over. We're going to go over the episode basically scene by scene. So if you've seen the episode, I'm going to be repeating mostly of what you saw there. And then overall, this episode is easily one of my favorites of the entire series. And I think it's mostly because of the idea of something that you really want to do versus something else you think you really should do, and how those can technically kind of be the same thing depending on what kind of person you are and what experiences you have in life. So why don't we just get into it? Let's go. Okay, so we're gonna break down the entire episode word for word. That's just how this is gonna be. Okay, so Thomas enters the house and he is flipping ecstatic. Like he and Roman are just over the moon getting a call back from this fictional person. I do think it's interesting that as soon as Roman makes a reference to an EGOT, an EGOT is short for Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and a Tony, so awards you can get for performances. As soon as he says that, Patton summons himself, which I find kind of interesting because normally when the sides summon themselves, it's because something was said to summon them indirectly. Like anytime they've ever talked about like Thomas being anxious or whatever, you know, Virgil summons himself. He just kind of shows up. That's one thing I found interesting, that Patton just shows up and it wasn't for any specific reason other than he just showed up. Like, why was he there? I don't know. I just thought it was weird. And then, you know, Patton goes on and he mentions the wedding after Thomas tells him when the date is for the callback. And I find it interesting here, and I actually mentioned this. There's a friend of mine I talked to, Sasha. They are on Tumblr, and I'll put their tag right here on the screen. Something they pointed out to me that I found very interesting was in this scene here, Thomas responds to Patton's things, you know, like, you're really excited to go and all this stuff with these half-hearted, yeah. Like, you know, and you really wanted to go. Silence. Yeah. I don't think Thomas ever really wanted to go, and I think a lot of this episode is Patton misshowing Thomas that the fact that he doesn't want to go is malice. It's hurtful, which it isn't. I don't know how you get not wanting to go to something as written as being malice or hurtful to the person that invited you to go. I mean, I don't know how you read that from that, but that's kind of how I saw it. But anyway, I find it very interesting that you have morality saying that, man, you were really excited to go too, and why would Patton not pick up on the fact that Thomas doesn't want to go? I find that very interesting. I guess he just assumes that because Thomas is such a good person, he's like, oh no, Thomas really wants to go to the wedding. He definitely does, like, for sure. And then we get one of the best scenes in the entire episode is Logan popping up. Now, if you watch my React video, I will point up there for the little clicky thing that'll show up. If you watch that, I don't initially catch that it's not Logan, that it's Deceit, and I think the reason is one, I didn't see how funnily he rose up. He rises up like crooked or something, and a lot of people are thinking that's because dark sides don't rise up. So Deceit is like, he doesn't really understand how to like come up into frame like a light side, which we're gonna get into the dichotomy of a light side versus a dark side because I think that's bullshit. But anyway, the point is that Logan rises up, and I did notice the tie in my React. I did notice that the tie was the original tie of Logan's, which just leads me to believe that Deceit just raids their closet for their clothes before realizing, oh wait, they don't wear that. I feel like there's some reason why Deceit's clothing is always wrong, because technically he wasn't fully wrong. He had Logan's actual shirt, because it had the logo on it, so like, because like you would think that if it was gonna be wrong, it would have been wrong totally, like, you know, because with the cat hoodie with Patton, I don't remember, I should have looked this up, but I don't remember whether or not Deceit Patton had the morality icon on his shirt. If he did, it's kind of weird that he's able to get the shirt but not like the extra article that they wear on top of their regular clothing. But I digress, I'm getting off topic, like I figured I would. But anyway, so we get Deceit, he shows up, and I think it's interesting how Roman doesn't remember his name. Like, come on, really, Roman, you're full of crap. I do think it's kind of weird how Virgil's instantaneously mad at Deceit. Like, what do you want? Like, that's really, not that it's out of character for Virgil, because Virgil's obviously anxiety, he's anxious all the time. But I do find it interesting that he's so mad so fast. And not to go deep down into the rabbit hole too far, but we have had Deceit show up multiple times in the series, and I think the way he shows up is important to note, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's lies and he's malicious, he's deceptive, he's manipulative, so he shows up to make Thomas lie. Gotta go with Logan here. That's a falsehood. I don't think that's how he works. If he is a lying character, which we're gonna get into that too, if he is lies and stuff like that, I don't think he makes Thomas lie. I think he helps Thomas lie if Thomas wants to lie. Because in Can Lying Be Good, the problem is that the situation had already happened, and now it was time for Thomas to explain why he missed a thing. Not that he's going to miss it, but that he missed it already. So now he has to come up with the reason of what he was doing. Does he tell the truth of where he was, or does he make up something? And that's why we get the different types of lies in that episode, to say, oh, well, there's like a lot of different ways you can explain that you were not there. And here's all the different ways you can lie about it, because there's lots of different ways to lie. And so that was a teaching episode through deceit. He kind of taught us how to lie in that episode. But that's because Thomas wanted to lie. He wanted to cover up. He didn't want to be a bad friend again, which is about this episode's about too. So in that one, that's how Deceit shows up. He shows up because Thomas is already considering that he wants to lie. And then at the end of Can Lying Be Good, we have the scene where Deceit pops back up again when Thomas lies to Joan, saying he didn't stand around in his living room for 30 minutes and talk to himself, which he did. So Deceit's like, shoot. Because Thomas lied again, that's why Deceit was there. And then in the next episode, the next episode Deceit shows up in is Why Do We Get Out of the Bed in the Morning? And that's whenever Logan's like, I will not have you lying to yourself. Because the second that Logan says that, you hear you called, and it's Deceit, because Thomas was lying to himself about, not having an idea for the video. So every time Deceit has shown up so far, it's been because Thomas has already considered that he wants to lie. Which is why he shows up here in this episode, at least in my opinion. I think he shows up because Thomas wants to lie to get out of having to go to the wedding at all. My problem is why does Thomas want to lie to get out of the wedding when he has a legitimate reason to not go? He's an actor. He has a callback. This is incredibly important topic for a actor. It's like, there's no rescheduling, like Roman says. And of course, if you watch my react, I don't know anything about callbacks, but after doing some research, yeah, callbacks are finite. If you don't go, then it sucks to be you. You don't even get a chance to get the part. But yeah, so I'm going, I went down the rabbit hole like I knew I would. But the point is that that's all incredibly important to note about Deceit, because I think a lot of people have latched on to the idea that he is completely evil or whatever, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's how this should work. And I also really like the part with all the bickering where Thomas is considering, you hear all their voices in the background, and I have to commend Thomas here. His voice acting for them has gotten a lot better over the past couple of years, and it's a lot easier to completely identify them by voice, even if you don't know who's saying what. Obviously, for fans like me who have watched the episodes a lot or have listened to the episodes as audio a lot, we tend to notice the inflections that he gives each character. But in an episode like this, where none of us have heard the lines that they're being said and they're off camera, I could tell who was saying what line without them having to say a name or say anything in a certain way. Just the tone of voice, his voice acting has gotten impeccable. I think it's very good, and he needs to go into voice acting because that was great. But yeah, so we get, Deceit's very specific lie of liberation of Europe from Nazi control. And then I think it's interesting how Thomas is like, he can say, because he doesn't like Nazis. And of course Virgil's like, that cannot be where the bar is. But it is, because Thomas wants him around. Thomas wants to get out of going to the wedding. He wants to get out of it. He wants to go to the callback. We know this by the end of the episode, that's why Deceit is here. Thomas wants to lie to get out of it. Why Thomas feels like he has to lie to his friends to get out of it when he could just tell them about the callback, I have no idea. But we're going on the dilemma of what the episode is, so let's just continue. And then Deceit's just like, the bar for skipping an important opportunity should be higher than a social engagement. Roman reacts, and I find that interesting because Roman would obviously choose the callback at this point. If it was up to him, obviously it's not. He has to take all the other sides into account. But Roman does think the callback is more important, but that's because Roman has creativity. It's his job to try to help Thomas achieve his hopes and dreams, and Thomas's hopes and dreams is to be a successful actor. And so that's why Roman wants to go to the callback. It's not malicious. It's not, he just wants what he thinks is best for Thomas, and what's best for Thomas right now in his mind is the callback. So we go to the callback. I also really like that right at the beginning of the episode, we get to see going, do you want to go to the callback or not? Do you want the part or not? Like it's so important to get that out there, because you have so many fighting arguments here of which is right, which is wrong, which is right, which is wrong. It's not about that. Which one do you want to go to? Do you want the part or not? Because if you don't go to the callback, you're not getting the part. At least if you go, you have a chance. Yeah, it might be a small chance, but it's a chance. And I feel like if the moral dilemma we continue on throughout this entire episode is lost, because it's not about which one is right and which one is wrong. It's about which one do you want to do? Like, which one matters more to you? Which one comes more natural? At the beginning of the episode, with how Thomas and Roman were celebrating, the more natural conclusion for character Thomas is to go to the callback. But then his morality kicks in and it's like, wait a minute, that's incredibly selfish to want to do something for yourself. Is it though? Is it really? Like, that's the whole grand scheme of this, and we'll go over that at the end. But that this is where it first comes into play. This part in here is where the true episode begins. And some shady manipulation begins happening. And I use manipulation in a very light way. Let's just say cunning begins to happen in a way that you wouldn't expect, because it's not deceit. So Patton says it's wrong to go back on a commitment. That is subjective at best, especially for a commitment that you haven't completely promised yourself to, or something you're not technically fully involved in. Now, Thomas was actually a part of the wedding, like maybe he was, a groomsman, or he was, I'm not sure about, any other religious type of stuff, depending on what kind of wedding it was. But, it'd be different if he was actually, like, a part of the wedding. Then there would be more of a moral dilemma of ruining the wedding. They have to replace him as a part in the wedding or whatever. But we know from later on that Thomas just planned on playing on his phone throughout the entire ceremony. So that's not really a problem, I don't think. It really depends on how much weight the wedding holds to Thomas. And as we see later on in the court session, the wedding is even written down on Thomas's inner calendar that Logan keeps. The callback is, regardless of how long he's known about it. So we know for a fact that Thomas himself doesn't hold the wedding in that high of a regard. To be honest, doesn't even have to be a wedding. It could be anything with his friends. It could be the reading from Can Lying Be Good that he missed for Joan. Like, this literally is the same dilemma that happened already within Thomas. Whenever Thomas was out on a date with that guy in Can Lying Be Good, and Roman and Virgil argued, saying, we should go. We promised Joan we would go, so we need to go. And Virgil pushed to get him to go, but Thomas stayed where he was because Roman put his foot down and says, this fella was awesome, so that's why they stayed. Why this dilemma is a little bit more harsher than that one, I don't know. I don't know why Desi didn't show up for that one, but he didn't show up for that one, so we're not going to talk about it that much. Moving on. The fact that Thomas doesn't have the callback written on his calendar proves that he never had any intention of going, regardless of whether or not the callback happened or not. Which means he was going to give the I forgot excuse, or he intended to lie either way. And the thing is like, whenever Patton says it's wrong, and Desi questions again and goes, it's wrong, Patton's like, yeah! And then Thomas is like, yeah. Like, it's kind of like, it's interesting that, like, Thomas agrees with Patton, but then also looks down at the floor and doesn't really confidently say that he agrees with Patton. I think it's pretty telling that Thomas doesn't trust Desi, so he automatically sides with Patton, who he thinks is more important in this scenario. He thinks Patton is the right one, the one who will lead him to the path of whatever is the right way to do things. But we learn later that Patton doesn't know how Thomas feels, and he's just doing what he thinks is right, which you should never do. Because if you do that, you are manipulating somebody into what you think is what is good for them, instead of asking them what is good for them or what they want. I'm not saying that Patton is doing this on purpose. I don't think Patton is purposely manipulative, but I do feel that he could have considered Thomas's feelings more and given him more questions. Because this whole next part here, I genuinely thought Patton was not Patton in this scene, okay? So Roman comes up with this idea that if Thomas's Aunt Patty were in the hospital, he would get a free pass to miss the wedding. Why should it be any different when something good comes up? This is very true. And it's not given its fair time to stand out because Virgil's immediately like, are you siding with deceit? Like, how dare you? How dare you side with our evil character standing over there? I don't think that line gives any indication that Roman was going to side with deceit. He was siding with going to the callback. Deceit has no side in this game. He is not here to make Thomas choose the callback over the wedding or the wedding over the callback. Deceit is here to prove to Thomas that he's lying to himself and to admit it and stop being, I don't know what word to use, to be so iffy about the entire situation. But Roman has a point. Why is it that we are only excused from things when something bad happens and not when something good happens? It is food for thought. Like, that's really important. I also think Roman's response to Virgil is probably one of the best lines in the episode. Are you seriously so close-minded to think that everything said by someone you don't like is automatically untrue? It definitely shows how much Roman has grown as a character, because this is kind of the pot calling the kettle black here, because Roman used to do that a lot with Virgil. He used to always sit there and completely disagree with Virgil, and that was mostly just because he didn't like him. It had really nothing to do with the fact of whether or not Virgil was right or wrong. It's of the idea that deceit is bad. Deceit is just a bad character. And siding with him means you're siding with the evil side, and that's all Virgil can see. But I also think it's telling to remember that Patton and Virgil and all of them are part of Thomas, so if Thomas doesn't like deceit, obviously his sides aren't going to either. His idea of what deceit is affects the others. And I think that's the full circle story that we have here. One of Patton's next lines is, "We have to be there." Deceit's immediate response is, "We don't have to do anything." And he is exactly right. It's not up to anybody whether or not we go to this wedding or not. It's not up to me. It's not up to the sides. It's up to Thomas. Thomas decides whether or not he wants to go to anything, and no one can force him to do anything either. And I feel like that's a really big, important part of the story as well, is the fact that proves right there that Deceit's not here to force Thomas to go to the wedding. That's not why he's here. His point is to help Thomas figure out why he wants to lie about going to the wedding or going to the callback. Why is he lying to himself about what he truly wants? And I feel like that's the most important thing. Okay, now we have the part where Deceit kind of leans into Roman's idea of Aunt Patty in the hospital. That makes sense, because to lie, you have to know the truth. And so Deceit would need to know the truth, which is the callback, versus the lie, which is where Roman comes in, because he's the creativity. He's the one that has to make up the flamboyant excuse. Not that Roman is malicious in any way about wanting to lie, but you have to be pretty creative to make up a good lie. And I feel like Roman and Deceit would have to work together if Thomas actually wanted to lie. And so Roman coming up with it, but not actually wanting him to lie, and Deceit being like, ooh, that's a good one, that just proves that they would have to work together if Thomas wants to lie. And then we have the part where they all talk over each other about, who's important, why are they here, the funny underwear joke. And then we have Thomas's line that says, I mean, it's not really hurting my friends if they think I'm gone for a better reason. And he's right. The callback is a better reason for him. That is a golden reason for him not to go, because number one, he's an actor. His job is to act. His job is to play a role in a movie or whatever. His job is to go to callbacks and hopefully succeed in winning them. But then Patton courageously turns to him, eyes wide, not hurting them. Like, yes, it's possible that Lee and Mary Lee might be a little upset that Thomas can't go to their wedding, but it's not going to destroy them that Thomas can't be there, especially because Thomas has a good reason. He's doing something that's going to achieve his dreams, something every actor strives for. And I feel like Patton is immediately taken aback that, oh my gosh, Thomas is going to choose himself over his friend? What? That's unusual. Like, it is really weird, because throughout the entire series, we've been shown that Thomas does anything and absolutely everything for his friends. I mean, that's become the joke Like, that's like the running thing for the series, is that character Thomas will do anything and everything for his friends. And while that's, you know, funny and like can be haha in the long run for like some really funny lines and scenes here and there, it's also very important to realize that, you know, that there's also a thing called toxic selflessness. Is kind of basically just the idea that if you give and give and give too much, you actually begin to harm yourself. And sometimes you do have to look out for yourself. Now, speaking as someone with both anxiety and depression, it is not a fun thing to have to deal with. It's not fun to sit there and have to constantly question your self-worth, to wonder whether or not you're worthy of something. And I feel like in this case, Thomas is not arguing with his sides, and he's not arguing with himself, he's arguing with society. What does society say is a better thing for him to do? It is more honorable to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. And I feel like that's where the real argument lies. I don't think it lies in what's more valuable between the wedding or between the callback. It's more about what makes you look good as a person, rather than what is actually the right thing to do. And then after we have the part where Patton's like not hurting them, Roman goes back and he mentions the director again, which I think is important. It's Hitchcock-Lucas, director of Psycho, Godfather Wars. Now, we have established now that this universe is separate from ours, where the Sanders Heights takes place. Breaking this down, for those of you who aren't movie buffs or just didn't catch it, the name is a combination of three big movie directors in our world. Alfred Hitchcock, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas, who directed Psycho, The Godfather, and Star Wars, respectively. So, if we are to believe that this world is an alternate universe to where this entity of a director has such a name as that must be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for that prestigious of a director. Like, Thomas could not miss this. Like, that is ridiculous to think that he would choose anything over that life-taking or life-changing in even more of a way than going to this callback would be. Because getting this callback would be a life-changing event for Thomas. And I feel like that's really important to note too. So that's obviously why it holds so much to Roman too, because this is something that Roman has strived for since he was, you know, created within Thomas. This is his job. He's finally succeeding in getting Thomas a part in something. And I feel like that's because every other time we've ever seen anything being mentioned about getting a part in something or performing, there's been mistakes. There's been no return callback. There's been issues. And this is the one time that Roman succeeds and it's being taken away from him. Patton's next line is, what is this wacky talk? You don't mean any of this. I'm your morality. I wouldn't be here if you did. Okay, breaking this line down, because damn if this isn't the most forceful Patton has ever been in this entire series. Because if you watch my react, the second Patton says this line, you look at my face and I subtitled it because I cover my hand, I'm in such surprise. That doesn't sound like Patton at all, because it doesn't. Patton's never been the kind of character to be like, well, I'm here and I know what's right. He's never been the kind of character. He's always been the understanding one, the one that's willing to listen to your side of things, the one that's been sympathetic. Like, how sympathetic was he to Virgil all the time? Like, all the time, he was always so sympathetic to, well, maybe Virgil, like, you know, he does do stuff, you know, he is important, he is part of us, he is part of Thomas, you know, like, whatever. Like, and then Deceit, throughout this line and throughout the subsequent lines about this, you watch Deceit's expression change, and it's actually kind of interesting. I'm going to read directly from my notes, because the way that I wrote this I actually really like. And I was like, after the "you don't mean any of this" line, the camera turns to Deceit and he squints, almost in disbelief as to what he is hearing. Patton tells Thomas that he doesn't mean something. How would Patton know how Thomas truly feels about the situation at this point? On what basis is he saying that Thomas doesn't mean any of it? The camera switches back to Patton and says, I wouldn't be here if you did, which doesn't make any sense at all. Patton is morality, the difference between right and wrong. He's also capable of controlling Thomas's direct emotions, as we've learned. He's not the one that tells the difference between the truth and the lie. He's not. If anyone is, it's Deceit. Because to be able to tell a lie, you have to know how to tell the truth. And I feel like Deceit wouldn't be able to know the difference between the truth and the lie, which they kind of pointed at earlier in the funny whenever, Thomas, let's give him the old liar, what color's my shirt? Like that right there, because Deceit was able to turn it around and stop himself, yes, by default, he probably does go to the lie, but I think he also can tell the truth, which also makes it great because that means he doesn't only speak in lies, and my god, that's the dumbest idea, because no interesting character with any kind of like good, comeback would always be able to talk in lies. That would be boring. I'm sorry. Like, if you liked that idea, I apologize. But like that, I don't like that idea for characters. So right after the "you don't mean any of this" line, Thomas immediately changes. His entire demeanor is just switched. He's like, right, you're right. I don't mean that. Okay. Don't freak out when I say this, but Patton is emotionally manipulating Thomas right now. Hear me out, okay? So, Patton is literally telling Thomas how he feels about a situation. Not even thinking about reaching a compromise. No, you don't feel this. Period. Like, full stop. That's just it. Like, it doesn't matter how Thomas actually feels. It's just Patton's like, nope, you don't feel that way. Stop it. Like, why are you talking about that? And then he gets Thomas to repeat his own words back to him. You don't mean that. To emotionally manipulate someone, one of the key things to do is to get them to repeat themselves, to make things seem real, to get them to repeat and go back on things again and again, to be like, oh, you're right, I'm wrong, you're right, that makes sense, I'm sorry. Then Patton turns around and jumps down Roman's throat, which makes me mad because Roman deserves none of the stuff that he gets in this episode, but let's continue. Patton's like, I thought you fought for honor. Why are you pushing Thomas to be dishonest? He hasn't? Like, that blows my mind, because Roman has not once in this entire episode stated that he wanted to lie. Roman's just like, he genuinely wanted to know, why do we get away with things when bad stuff happens, but not when good stuff happens? It is a legitimate thing that could be discussed, but because Patton thinks that lying, like, he's so lost in the idea of lying to Thomas's friends that, like, no, you suggested this, which means you want to lie. And Roman's like, no, like, he even starts to be like, no, I wasn't, doing that. And then Deceit comes in, and he kind of, I don't want to say it in this way, but I've watched this so many times that I can't help, this is what I see. But Deceit comes in as Patton is kind of like grilling Roman, and he's just like, he returns the attention back to himself. And there's a couple of scenes where the camera kind of turns to him and he's kind of like, oh, I have an idea. And that's where he's like, okay, I need to prove to Patton why I'm here. Like, now's the time. We have Thomas standing there, and he doesn't say anything to Roman about what Patton is saying. And then Roman says, oh man, I would have stayed in my room if I knew Dad was going to take us on a guilt trip. Because that's exactly what Patton's doing. Like, Patton is making Thomas feel guilty about even considering doing something for himself, even if it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. He's putting so much weight on a wedding that Thomas isn't even a part of. I get that weddings are important to certain people of religious beliefs and things like that, but it has been made clear that this wedding is not one of those. Thomas made it clear at the beginning with all his awkward responses to Patton that he doesn't really care about this wedding. So why is Patton putting so much weight on it? Because it's not about the wedding. But let's continue. Okay, so Deceit is like, perhaps Thomas isn't so innocent. And Patton's like, well, nobody's perfect. Except for Thomas. He loves his friends. Like, Patton, sweetheart, I love you, but Thomas isn't perfect and nobody is. That right there is the ultimate breaking point that something's up with Patton, because Patton knows that Thomas isn't perfect, and he knows that Thomas has issues to work through. It's why he's there. He is Thomas's morality to show him the rights and wrongs of the world, but I also feel like he's a little skewed because Thomas has put himself so down low in terms of the totem of importance, where like Thomas is here and his friends are like way up here in the middle of nowhere. Like, that I think is the ultimate problem with this episode, is that Patton doesn't have as much self-worth related to what Thomas wants. I feel like in Patton's mind, Thomas's wants and needs are even lower than his friends' wants and needs, which is imbalanced to begin with. Okay, courtroom time. We're finally here, and it's been 30 minutes. Let's continue. So, Deceit drags them all here, and he says, and this is good to quote exactly, "You can defend him all you like, but you can't change the facts. Is Thomas an innocent little lamb?" Thomas is confused as to why they're there. And so Patton's like, Deceit's trying to prove that you care more about yourself than your friends. But don't worry, kiddo, we'll show him. Is this the face of a man who feels like he's innocent of this crime? Look at this. No. Obviously not. Like, he obviously knows that he's not innocent of this. But there's also an important thing to note here, that Patton is completely wrong. Deceit didn't bring them here to prove that Thomas is selfish or cruel to his friends. Deceit brings them to the courtroom to prove whether or not Thomas is innocent. Innocent of what? Well, if you listen to every single question that Deceit says, he's asking about the things surrounding the callback, its importance in Thomas's life, and how much it could change the course of Thomas's life. And why does the wedding hold so much importance to the other sides, other than the wedding is for two friends of his? No, I don't think once is it ever really about how much Thomas cares more about himself than his friends, because if you've ever watched The Standard Size before, we know Thomas's friends mean absolutely everything to him, and he would do everything in his power to do anything for them. So that's not even a part of the discussion. So then, Roman reads off the charges or whatever, and, funny stuff. Broken gavel. Funny stuff. But we're here for the lore, so let's continue. So, Roman asks, how does the defendant plead? And of course, Patton's like, not guilty! And of course, Thomas is like, not guilty? Like, I don't want to be guilty, even though I know I'm guilty, because, but obviously, that's, okay. Again, Patton echoes Thomas here. I just feel like that's important because it happens like 6 times in this episode. But moving on. Logan's here! Summoned directly by Deceit. I also think it's interesting that he has a law textbook in his hand and he literally says a law term as he is summoned. He says affidavit, which is a written sworn statement of fact voluntarily made by under oath or affirmation administered by a person authorized to do so by law. Get it? Sworn statement of fact. Because he's logic. So also credit to a Tumblr user, Stricken with Clairvoyancy, for this part, but their headcanon for Logan, reading the law dictionary book and when he's summoned and stuff is because Thomas is rattling in his brain about what he knows about law, and so like Thomas is indirectly causing Logan to read about law and like law readings and stuff. I think that's what they do. It's actually pretty cool. I think it's also really funny that Logan doesn't see Deceit until after he notices they're in a courtroom and Deceit is standing right in front of him. I'm just like, oh, my silly logical boy. Okay. But anyway, I also think it's important to know that Logan does know some idioms, because that was the whole idea of like knowing that wasn't Logan at the beginning, was because straight from the horse's mouth. Obviously Logan wouldn't know how to interpret that. I also think the part where Thomas explains what the idiom means is also kind of indirectly Logan, because that's kind of how Logan talks, because he talks in those kind of finite sentences. But anyway, I also find it interesting how Thomas still sticks with the he doesn't like Nazis line about why Deceit got to stay. We know Thomas has full control over this. Like, if he wanted Deceit to go away and end the scenario, I feel like Thomas actually could. But he chooses to leave Deceit there. Maybe he wants his help. I don't know. He wants his help. Moving on. So anyway, Deceit begins questioning Logan. And at first, he riles up Logan because he's trying to get him mad, because that's what Deceit does. He's a trickster and I love him. And then you have Deceit where he asks Logan if he is aware that the callback and the wedding share the same date, which he is. And I find it interesting that Logan Logan's always been this very still, I am logic, I am firm, and blah, blah, blah. But I find it interesting in this part that Logan kind of sits still. He breaks his eye contact with Deceit, he kind of shuffles his arms a little bit, he moves. And not that Logan can't move, he's not a robot, literally, puppet episode, but like, it's kind of like, I find it really weird that he acted like that. He acted with emotion, which he claims to not have. He doesn't like, it's so weird. Like, I don't know. He looks down and then like over at Virgil, and then like we don't even get to see if Virgil is like looking back at him. Almost like Logan just agreed that he knew about it even though he didn't, which is lying. But anyway, so let's see. Checking my notes here. So then Deceit asks Logan if he thinks logic can be brought to the situation. And of course, there's always room for logic. So then Deceit lies and he's like, but Patton insisted we leave you alone. And Patton's like, objection, misleading the witness. And we had the whole part where Roman's like, I'm gonna allow it because Roman thought the look on Logan's face was funny. But what I find interesting is that, yeah, that is misleading the witness. He is misleading because he's lying. It's not like Patton came out and said, I don't want you here. But it is interesting that Patton never once questioned about a possible compromise. If there's anybody in this group that was going to come up with a compromise, it was going to be Logan. And a lot of people have debated about the fact that it was Deceit that benched Logan. Patton could have asked for help. I mean, gosh, Logan says multiple times in this episode whether or not if he could join in and, whatever, and Roman's like, we already have our roles, so there's really no room for you. If Patton really felt like he couldn't do it, if he really wanted a compromise where both sides were happy, like Thomas is happy because he gets to go to the callback and Patton's happy because he goes to part of the wedding of his friends, I feel like Patton would have called on Logan, but I don't think Patton wanted a compromise. I honestly don't. I think if he wanted a compromise, he would have asked Logan, but he didn't want it. He wanted only logical, sound facts of why it's better to go to the wedding and not the callback. Period. Patton didn't want to hear anything about going to the callback because going to the callback is selfish. It's something that's completely and solely only for Thomas, which is bad, as Patton states later. Doing something for yourself is bad. Deceit says it, and Patton literally agrees with it. We'll go over that later. But to continue, we have the part where Deceit asks which one is better. Logan surprises Deceit with the idea that missing the wedding loses more for Thomas, which, thinking about it logically, that is per the course of Thomas's normal actions. He's always sacrificing himself for his friends, so it makes sense that Logan's first option is for Thomas to go to the wedding. He might lose his friends if he doesn't go. If they are not his friends because he doesn't go to his wedding, he has bad friends. Deceit's like, okay, fine. Obviously, Thomas would not want to lose his friends, but what's your point? Like, how do you see it? And of course, Logan's like, he doesn't think missing the wedding is that bad because the only loss would be two friends. And he doesn't really say anything else on the matter at that point. Then Deceit kind of changes the question, going from which event has more to offer us versus which event could cost us more to miss/lose. They're basically the same question, but one is loss and one is a gain. So it's not really fair to compare the two, but Logan does offer a unique stance on it. The only thing the wedding will give Thomas is a potential increase in depression, which the camera changed to Virgil kind of nodding in agreement. Like he was going to say something, but then he kind of just was like, yeah, okay. They can't deny Thomas won't like watching two people, get married and love each other, because we all know in the series how hard it's been for Thomas to be single. It affects him heavily to think about being in a relationship with somebody. And having to sit there and watch two people be joyous and happy while Thomas knows he's missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity would not be fun for him. It just wouldn't. And then, if he did win the callback, it would change his life forever. His life would never be the same after that. And it's not just any callback. Logan uses the word auteur to describe Hitchcock Lucas, which if you look up the word auteur, it's not just a funny or a interesting, synonym to use for a director. It's actually defined as a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie are so great that the filmmaker is regarded as the author of the movie. Which is true. If you think about Alfred Hitchcock, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas, they are considered fantastic directors in our world of basically writing a very original, unique story for their three movies. It's a prestigious title to have. So it's not just any movie callback. This is the movie callback. And then we have the part of the calendar. So Thomas is known about the callback for little over 2 hours. And he's known about the wedding for 6 months, 4 days, 3 hours, and 1 minute per the line that Logan gives. And yet Logan's calendar says callback in all caps, clearly filling the entire day. Thomas tries to say he tampered with the evidence, and Deceit walks off laughing, but I don't think he did. I don't think so. I feel like that calendar is literally something like Deceit is manipulative, yes. He can change himself and he can change the other's outfits like he did, because not sure how many of you are members of Thomas's channel, but on the member live stream, it was confirmed that Deceit changed all their clothes. So you can thank all their outfits to Deceit, including Virgil's matching tie. I think that's fantastic. Getting off topic. But anyway, I just think that the calendar obviously belongs to Logan, so saying that Deceit could change it makes no sense to me. Like, I just don't know how that would be possible. And I think Deceit plays along because, like I said, Deceit's a trickster. I just feel like that's what he does. Patton's next part is terrible. Like, he literally tries to bribe Logan to change the calendar. Really? Like, you can't tell me Patton doesn't know that you're not allowed to bribe somebody in a courtroom. Like, yeah, obviously Patton doesn't know what he's doing, but you can't bribe somebody to, like, oh, please change it? Like, are you kidding? That's not how that works. And then Virgil kind of comes in and he, like, defends Patton. No, he doesn't want to play your game. Like, really? We've all been playing by the rules. They've all been playing by the rules at this point. So why are you defending Patton? Yes, I know he's the sunshine dad, but, like, he can make mistakes, and he is making one currently, and no one is calling him out on it. Nobody. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for your favorite characters to do something that may be morally ambiguously wrong, but it's also not okay to pretend it's not happening. Like, because it is. It's happening. Thomas really doesn't want to be seen as a bad person, and he's putting a lot on Patton's shoulders, let's be honest. Patton is morality, though. The difference between right and wrong. Knowing you shouldn't steal someone else's property is, you know, obviously a moral thing of right and wrong. It's wrong to steal their stuff because it's not yours. Patton is a moral compass, as Deceit says. And his moral obligations are so skewed at this point that it's not about truths and lies. It's about Thomas being made out to be a good person no matter what the sacrifice is. Because in the end, it's not about the friendship, it's not about the wedding, it's not about any of that. It's about what makes you look good in society's eyes and in your own eyes. What makes you like a good person. And like a good person is to go to the wedding because it makes you a martyr. You are sacrificing something possibly good, something that you really want for the greater good. So questioning Virgil is a big bag of worms to open, but Deceit does it anyway. Deceit gets him up there by teasing him, saying, oh, you would have said anything good anyway. Go on, answer me your questions. Because that's the kind of character that Virgil is. Deceit's questions to Virgil don't really, they're kind of just poking fun because Deceit likes poking fun at Virgil. It's Patton's questions that really get me, like, that kind of bother me because, like, Patton doesn't have a reason as to why the wedding is more important or why it's more morally right. It's more along the lines of, he's Thomas, and yeah, that's it. It's just because he's Thomas, because Thomas would do anything for his friends, and that's my argument. It's a really crappy argument, Patton. You need to come up with a better reason. It just kills me because, like, you know, Thomas is this special being who can do no wrong at all, you know. It hurts because, you know, Thomas just loves his friends so much, give me a break. Like, really? That's really the best you can come up with? Okay, then we get Roman on the stand. There is apparently a translation of the way that Deceit spells Roman's name funny. I can't remember what it is, but it's something that could be like, I think it's remorse. I think is remorse and, like, I don't know if it's Finnish or something, but I'll put it up on screen. I don't remember what it is, but apparently that's what it is. So yay for Deceit making a butt joke about Roman, because who hasn't at this point? Roman is the best witness in this entire thing because he shows the other side of how I think Thomas feels about the situation. If it were reversed, if he was the one having the wedding and he invited somebody who said they were going to come and then they canceled. So at the beginning of Roman's questioning, Deceit is basically calling out how much more importance is being given to the wedding, even though it technically has nothing to do with Thomas's life whatsoever. Heck, it wouldn't even be a problem if Lee and Mary Lee hadn't invited him to begin with. Roman has no explanation as to why the wedding is more important. It just is. And then he brings up the compromise. And of course, Roman doesn't come up with a good compromise because he wants to please Thomas. And to please Thomas, he has to pretend he doesn't want the callback, even though Roman wants it so bad he can feel it in his soul. And then Patton comes up to question Roman. And I don't think Patton gets the answer he expects, because Patton leads him on by explaining that he's getting married to the second handsomest prince in the world. And I'm sorry, that scene is adorable, by the way. Whenever Patton's like, it's you, silly, you're the cutest, most handsomest prince in the world. Like, okay, that's adorable. Thank you for my reality content. I appreciate that. But anyway, I find it interesting that right after, Patton's like, oh, well, Eliza Minnelli can't come, Roman, they do the play off of that bitch and all that stuff. I find it interesting that Roman's like, well, she's her own person, and it's my big day, and her being there won't change that. Because it doesn't change that. It is still the person's big day, regardless of whether or not the people they invited are there or not. I think it's also very interesting that Roman is so firm on his opinion of this that he immediately summons himself back to the judge's seat and says, next witness. And Deceit is there instantaneously, ready to be questioned by Patton, because that's how Roman feels about this. And I think Roman's point of view is probably the most valid out of all of them, because he's considering Thomas's feelings, but also considering the feelings if it was reversed and Thomas was the one getting married and he had a friend with another problem. Like, he's seeing it from both sides of the argument here. And that's probably the closest we get to, like, the real lesson is to, like, at the end, whenever Patton's like, putting yourself into someone else's shoes. That's what Roman did. He put himself in the shoes of the friend that's having the wedding. And he's like, well, if my friend had something better to do, that's okay. Like, it's her life. I don't want to make her do something she doesn't want to do, which is valid and fair. So, moving on. This part here hits me pretty hard with Deceit, because I think this is the first indication that we get that Deceit is not just deceit. So, we have this part here where Patton asks if, Deceit, if that is your real name, and he goes, it is, which we also know from the member live stream is a lie. Deceit actually does have a real name, and we'll get it eventually. Who knows when, but we'll get it. I think it's also very interesting about the part where, obviously Virgil makes fun of Deceit for getting too edgy, but Deceit says, I don't want Thomas to be disadvantaged in a world where you can die for not following the rules made in the name of a lie. There's a user on Tumblr. I don't have their username right here. I'll put it up on screen. I'm very sorry I couldn't say it verbatim, but they call it like this. And so I had a hard time interpreting this line because sometimes words can be difficult for me. But what they said was, and I'll quote, it's all about agency. Deceit is still trying to do what he thinks is best for Thomas. In a world where the laws of society are arbitrated by those with power, deception often feels safer than playing by the exact letter of the law. He wants Thomas to have more agency and control in his own life rather than being forced to just being another cog in the system. That is society as a whole. He wants Thomas to make decisions for himself, about himself, and not just the society as a whole or how it perceives him. Because as I've stated before, that is what this is about. This isn't about Thomas doing something for his friends versus doing something for himself. It's doing something to change how society sees Thomas. Because in the end, this isn't about, yeah, he's afraid his friends will hate him or he'll lose his friends. But in the grand scheme of it, he's worried about how he will look as a friend, how he is perceived as a friend, rather than Mary Lee and Lee's sexual feelings on the matter. Then Deceit switches places with Patton, and he wants to ask, he's like, why is going to the wedding more important than the callback? And Patton answers, because it feels better to give something to someone else than to take something for yourself. Which is true at times. That's not wrong. Patton's not wrong. It is nice to do things for people. But when I feel like your reason should hold a little more weight when it could literally change your life forever, and it's something that you've strived for forever. But then Deceit is like, but Thomas won't enjoy giving the bride and groom his time because it costs something very important to him. Not only does this go against your claim, but it also discourages Thomas from performing more acts of selflessness in the future. Try again. Deceit is right. If Thomas does skip the callback and he goes to the wedding, and he doesn't enjoy the wedding, which he won't because he admits that later, he's not going to feel good about it. If you do something for a friend and they either don't appreciate it, or you yourself don't have a good time doing the thing you're doing for the friend, that obviously kind of makes you feel icky, where you don't want to do it again, and that's the whole point of this part. It's going to make him miserable to the point where he won't want to sacrifice something he could have done for himself, regardless of what the next, compromise needs to be. He's going to immediately jump to himself because that made me feel bad last time. I don't want to do that again. Then to answer that question, to read and state, because Deceit said try again, Patton says, the wedding is more important because Thomas should support his friends. And Deceit is like, why are their wants more important than Thomas's? And Patton's like, they're not, but friendship is more important than acting in our own self-interest. Patton says that Lee and Mary Lee's wants are not more important than Thomas's, but then continues to say that friendship is more important than our own self-interest. This is an oxymoron. Patton is claiming that Thomas's friends outweigh his own issues. My friend Maxie brought this up in a great little part here. If you go back to the episode, The Mind versus the Heart, we get a similar scenario where Thomas has things to do and then friends call needing his help. It's Logan and Patton arguing this time, and they argue over what's more important. Logan believes his work and personal health are more important, while Patton goes with the good old "they've been there for you," like Thomas owes his friends help in return because they helped him. That's not how friendship works. Yeah, give or take, but it's not supposed to be something that's kept track of like that. It's not like, oh, well, you went to this and you helped me with this, so now you owe me for this. That's not how friendship works. Friendship is a give or take based on the wants and needs of that person. Their wants should never overweigh your needs. Thomas tells Patton in that episode, quote, a lot of times I spread myself too thin. I also tend to make others a priority over me and their priorities make others a priority over me and their priorities over mine. And many times it's great, it's necessary, but other times I need to make myself the priority and make sure I'm doing okay. Which Patton instantaneously responds, oh, of course, I never wanted you to feel like you couldn't. Are you sure about that, Patton? Because back to the current episode, Deceit gives the definition of egoism. Egoism, or putting it simply, acting in your own self-interest. And Patton immediately shouts, that's wrong. And Deceit's like, no, you're wrong. So now Thomas can't ever think about himself ever because it's wrong to think about himself. I'm sorry, Patton. I don't know what has happened to you, but your moral compass is all skewed and it's all messed up and I don't know why. We're just gonna ignore the philosopher part because obviously Max Stirner is a piece of shit, being the fact that he's a racist and did all this other junk. But we are going to talk about egoism because egoism isn't something that he made up. Egoism is something that's been defined for a long time. It's obvious that all humans are egoists. We always think about what we want and what we want to do. First and foremost, it's like an innate thing. Kind of like how animals are, where survival of the fittest is kind of like the idea that everything needs to be strong, but it's more along the lines of who can be the most cunning, who can do things the proper way. So it's kind of like in the idea that, we're all fitted to have ourselves survive and to be able to live in a society with other people. We have to know how to turn off that innate ability of only caring for ourselves, to be able to turn on our empathy and care about those around us. Deceit says the point is Thomas is an unconscious egoist and his dilemma is actually between something that serves him versus something else that serves him. Which is true, because Thomas obviously is an actor. He wants to achieve things in life and be an actor, but he also wants to be seen good by his friends. So both of these things will make him better in some way. But which one is the one that is considered least selfish by society? The wedding. It seems selfish to do something for yourself when you have the opportunity to do something for somebody else. Then he says the part where I think we get almost basic confirmation that deceit is not only deceit. Because he says, and I quote, if Thomas wanted to be seen as a good friend more than he wanted the role of a lifetime, well then I'm all for that. But I just don't buy it. Deceit doesn't buy it because that's why he's here. Deceit is here because Thomas, deep down inside, wants to lie. It's the whole point of everything here. But Thomas's conscience, i.e. Patton, is doing everything it can to stop Thomas from lying by skewing his view into seeing how selfish he is by putting something that might change his life, a need to pursue a bigger job, over the wants of a friend and a promise he made. Because the grand scheme of it is that Lee and Mary Lee getting married is a want. Nobody has to get married. People get married because they want to. They want to connect. They feel like they need that ceremony, that whole exchange of vows to signify how much they love each other. A lot of people feel that way, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. But it is a want. It's not something needed. The callback to Thomas is a need because he's an actor. Thomas needs a job to take care of himself. He needs the job to pay his bills. He needs the job because he's an actor, and that's the only way actors get jobs, is to go to performances, go to callbacks, sing auditions, and things like that. And I think that's the grand scheme of everything, is the fact that Thomas is putting a friend's want over a need of his. And while it's okay to put your friend's wants over your wants, it's not okay to put a need of yours underneath a friend's wants. It's okay to look out for yourself and to choose to do things for yourself. That's totally fine. But for some reason in this situation, there is. And I think it's because Patton is so skewed on what's morally correct. We promised, we can't break that promise. Breaking a promise is wrong. That's all subjective. It really depends on the situation as a whole. And in this situation, Thomas is still lying regardless of whether or not he goes to the wedding. If he goes to the wedding, he's lying that he wants to be there. If he doesn't go to the wedding, technically he's not lying because something more important did come up at the callback. So we move on. I will say that I think it's interesting, the scene with Patton where he's questioning himself, because at first you can see him running. He does the running thing. It reminds me of the chess short from Pixar. I don't remember what movie it shows before. I'll put a picture on screen, but it reminds me of that scene because it shows the man playing chess against himself, and then eventually it gets to the point where he's playing against himself so fast that you don't see him moving back and forth from side to side, and he begins like cunning and laughing and talking to himself so fast that it looks like there's two different people there, or they're there at the same time actually directly talking to each other, which is what happens with Patton here. And that was the first thing I thought of while I was watching it. I was like, okay, that's actually kind of funny. So now, we are at the culmination of this entire discussion. We are now at Thomas on the stand. I won't go over everything that is said, but obviously, Deceit presses him, and he admits it. Deceit says, stop stalling and admit it. What am I doing here, Thomas? Am I the snake come to trick you into sinning? Or have you had your mind made up since the moment you received the news about the callback? You didn't even forget about the wedding, did you? It was all an act. And Thomas just breaks. And I'll quote his entire thing here. Fine, I want to go to the callback. I was planning on playing Word Crush on my phone during the wedding ceremony to keep my mind off the fact that I'm single. I don't want to go. I'm afraid to go. And on top of that, a dream come true fell into my lap, scheduled on the same day. Anyone would want to go to the callback. So yeah, I tried to force myself to forget about the wedding, and now I want to lie to my friends so they don't hate me for not supporting them. I'm a liar. I do feel bad for Thomas, but he's finally admitted how he truly feels. Deceit, after cheering, is like, who knew convincing people to do something they really wanted to do could be so easy? Because that's what Thomas really wanted to do. He wanted to lie to go to the callback, which that's, I think, the biggest problem of Deceit's final thing is that later on he's like, I'm trying to teach you a lesson, but it's literally impossible. It's because Deceit doesn't have the finite mentioning at the end there of why it's important that Thomas recognizes that he's lying to himself. It's not about choosing the wedding over the callback. It's about being true to yourself and being true to what you really want. And I feel like that's the part that we miss in this episode. We do have confirmation that it's possible, or that it is. This episode has another part that will be connected to it in the future. They didn't label this part 1 because the next episode will not be a direct continuation, so they didn't want to confuse people. But there is a technical part 2 at some point. So maybe we'll get more about the ambiguity of everything and why it is so black and white, why there is only go to the callback or go to the wedding. There's no compromise of, when is the callback? Why can't we just go to the callback and then go to the wedding ceremony, like the reception, or, why can't we like go to the wedding at the beginning and then leave early to go to the callback? There is no compromise here. Obviously, Logan being in the background the entire time, the one character who probably would have brought compromise to the situation is kicked out. And I think that's because Thomas doesn't see a compromise being fair, because if he gives himself anything, it's bad, which is also, that also points true to Patton, because Patton says the same thing too. He's also like, doesn't want to do anything. It's like, I'm your reality. That's it. Game over. You don't think that way. You don't want to go to the callback. You want to go to the wedding. Period. This is the most difficult part of the episode for me. And it's the part where Roman sentences Thomas to go to the wedding, which in a sense, even though it sounds like it's being phrased as the right answer, is honestly still technically a punishment. Regardless of whether or not Thomas wanted to lie about going to the callback, he does not want to go to the wedding. He doesn't want to think about being single, and that's exactly what's going to happen when he goes. Yeah, he might be happy for his friends, but it's going to make him miserable. Like, it just is. And also, Roman's line, when they come back into the living room, and quote, "It is my sworn duty to help Thomas achieve his hopes and dreams. But Thomas wouldn't dream of attaining his dreams through deceitful means." While this is true, Thomas is still technically lying to his friends. Sure, he'll be there, but it's not like he's gonna tell them he didn't want to come. And by not telling them about the callback, he's also lying by omission, which we've been over in Can Lying Be Good? If Lee and Mary Lee are true friends and they find out about the callback, they're going to be upset. Like, that Thomas could turn down such an amazing opportunity for himself. And Thomas could be like, well, I wanted to be here for you guys. Well, that's true. It's also half-hearted. He didn't want to go. Plain and simple. And then, deceit is, he's upset or whatever. Thomas tells him, he's like, I don't understand. You got what you wanted. You proved I'm not as honest as I'd like to believe. And deceit is forcefully like, but you're still missing the point. Like, if deceit really cared about which option it was, like if he didn't care about the callback versus the wedding, he wouldn't have been so upset when Roman punished Thomas to go to the wedding. Because Roman is still forcing Thomas to lie to himself right now. Even though, obviously, Roman wants Thomas to go to the callback, he also doesn't want Thomas to be upset with himself inwardly for disappointing his friends. Because, again, Roman is one of Thomas's sides he gets affected. As someone with depression, our inner voice can be horribly loud. And while this opportunity is great for Thomas, his morality is flaring. It's like he has to be there for his friends. That's his thing. He's the best friend, everybody. It's how he identifies himself. It's the right and moral thing to do. But Deceit's point is also being missed because I don't think he can fully explain himself, which is unfortunate. Then we get the saddest point in this episode and the point that makes me want to cry. Deceit tries to use an analogy to get his point across. He's like, life is like a piñata. And Patton responds, colorful and full of stuff that makes you happy? And he's like, sure. And you want that stuff that makes you happy, right? Do I? Roman's do I there? Boy, doing me a heck of concern, okay? Because that kills me. That murders my soul. Roman has practiced and done so much to want to be happy, to make Thomas happy with his stuff. And he can't because he keeps getting shut down by everybody around him. It's even worse than Virgil sometimes, because, Virgil was always, made sure to be included. Roman has sacrificed so much to get to this point, and he's being played up to be the hero, because you get, the part where Patton looks at him surprised and proud, and you get the part where Virgil looks at him surprised and proud. And while you can take those as, they're grateful for Roman choosing to do what he did, you can see the fur in the air from my cat. Anyway, while you can see that, please give the boy something, anything to show that he has achieved something to Thomas. Please. I think Deceit was trying to use the piñata analogy like this. If the stuff inside the piñata is what you want, to get it, it's easy to just break the piñata and get the stuff out that you want. If you don't have a blindfold on. But piñatas are meant to be hit with the blindfold. So play the game that way if you want, because that's how the game is meant to be played. But if you take the blindfold off, it's easier to get the things that you want. In this instance, friendship is the blindfold. Thomas has this blindfold of friendship on, where to get something, he has to do something for his friends. That is the only way he gets his self-worth, is through his friends. But if he takes off the friendship blindfold and allows himself to look through the lens of what he truly wants, it will also make his friends happy. Because if Thomas were to get this role, if he goes to the audition and he wins the callback, right? Obviously his friends would be happy for him, right? If they're really his friends, they would be happy that he is achieving something that he has dreamed about his entire life. So why is it that he can't have something good? Why can't he take off the blindfold and hit the piñata and get the happiness out of it in the same way that his friends can? It's possible that not only is the blindfold friendship, but the blindfold is also being a good person. Thomas believes that no matter what, the end justifies the means. It's not about how his friends feel, it's about how he is perceived by the people around him. If Thomas would just take the blindfold off of having to be a good person all the time, no matter what, and let himself make decisions with his own wants having the same weight as others, he'd be a lot happier. But nope, he forces himself to go to the wedding to prove he's a good friend, when being a good friend should be a natural decision, not something you have to internally debate yourself with. And then we have to see just being done with the sides, and you know what? After all of this and watching all of this, I feel him. Holy crap. I've watched the scene at the end a lot because I wanted to get my full interpretation down, and woo! How much they misinterpret him. Like, I feel him. I feel you, Deceit. Jesus. Alright, so yay for Logan popping up. Woohoo! Welcome back. And look at that side. Look at that side by side. That is beautifully edited and looks fantastic. I didn't say much about the very beginning of the episode when Virgil shows up. I didn't say anything about that actually. Started with the actual episode. Virgil's green screen editing could have been a little bit better because he was obviously green screened to be on Thomas's living room area because Thomas is behind him, so Virgil would have to be on a green screen effect. But this side by side looks fantastic. Thomas did a really good job, both as Deceit and Logan, giving them both enough room to stand there next to each other, while still making it pretty obvious that they were looking at each other. So I thought that was really nice. And then, big good thing, boop, Deceit logo. Where is my merch, Thomas? You better hook me up because I want me some Deceit merch. Okay, thanks. Also, something else about this logo. I also think this means Deceit has a seat at the table, as it were. That means, like, yeah, he may have failed this time, but I get the feeling he's gonna be back, like, pretty soon. Logan has referenced this before. He said something similar about Virgil in the first part of Accepting Anxiety. Quote, he, Virgil, may not have had a physical presence, but he was always there within Thomas to some extent, end quote. Which, in my mind, makes me believe that once a side is physically formed to Thomas, that gives them a seat at the table in Thomas's life, more than they had before. And then we move on. Thomas thanks Roman for setting him straight. That just feels like Thomas is rubbing salt in Roman's wounds, so to speak. Roman being excited for the callback and helping Thomas achieve that, being wrong in some way. It burns so bad. Ugh. And also, not sure if it's just me, but Virgil being so firm on the never let him or his friends stick around that long ever again. And Thomas is like, but what if? Never! Cool? And then Thomas repeats it again, which is like the 4th or 5th time he's repeated something to a side in this episode. I swear to God, it can't be a coincidence. I don't know if he's ever done that in an episode before, to the fact that I've noticed it like this. Then again, why does Virgil get a say? Like, I get that he's anxiety and stuff, but if you remember your own words, Virgil, from Can Lying Be Good? Quote, you're the boss, Thomas. There's also Deceit, glass houses, like don't throw stones where you're gonna break the room you're in, because that's kind of what Virgil's doing. He's really pushing on the fact that there's something hiding that he's hiding from everybody. So there's that. And then we get to the part that I probably disagree the most with, so let's just do it. Alright, so Patton apologizes to Thomas for lying after all the other sides leave. And it rubs me the wrong way, mostly because he was so patronizing to Roman before, Even though Roman didn't suggest the lying, Deceit twisted the words to, which makes sense because you need to be creative to lie, but moving on. When Roman brought up the unpatty excuse, Patton just nailed him, being like, dishonest and stuff. But now it's okay because Patton thought he was doing the right thing, so it's okay that he lied? No, that's not how lying works. Just because you hope and believe doesn't make it okay to assume that you know how someone feels about a situation. It's not okay. Morally, it's not okay, which is really weird that Patton's lying is being excused the way it is. And I'm not trying to villainize Patton here, don't take it that way. I still really love Patton a lot. I just feel like a lot of his actions in this episode were given a pass because he is morality. Because he is considered in this universe of Thomas's life to be the ultimate right and wrong. Where I don't think in this scenario there is a right or wrong answer. It should have been a choice. So that's pretty much how the episode ends. Thomas gives his closing statement about the moral of the story, which, let me touch on that. Having empathy is fine. Wanting to be there for your friends is fine. All of these things are great things to, strive for and achieve. That's what being a friend is about. But then there's burnout. Like I've mentioned before, there's toxic selflessness, where you give and give so much that it burns you out. Character Thomas is given to his friends again and again in this series. There's so many jokes, so many ends, that we have no reason to believe that Thomas would lie to them, quote Roman, out of malice, in deceitful means, about getting out of the wedding. Telling them about the callback or going to the callback is not a lie. Saying that he doesn't want to go to the wedding is not a lie. Those are truths. And to tell his friends that, I don't know why he believes he has to lie. Those things aren't lies. Those things are actually happening. A lie would be like using the Aunt Patty excuse. That is a lie. And then going to the callback. When you could have just told him about the callback. Deceit wanted Thomas to be honest with himself and do something for himself for once. I also find it interesting that Deceit didn't want Thomas to lie and skip the wedding with a lie, even though he was willing to use it. It's important to also note that he dropped it immediately when the rest of them did. So there's that. And then Patton is he's just very skewed in his way of thinking. It wasn't until after Thomas admitted that he wanted to go to the callback that Patton seemed upset. Like he hadn't considered that Thomas wouldn't want to go to the wedding. In the end, Patton got what he wanted. He wanted Thomas to be self-sacrificing, morally right in this case, but I don't think there's a right answer unless you do what you naturally want to do. If he naturally wanted to go to the wedding and felt like that was more important, then that's fine. If he naturally wanted to go to the callback and he went to the callback, that's fine. They have different weights of importance depending on what kind of person you are. It's unfair to compare them. And empathy isn't a blindfold. This is both truth and false. As stated before, it depends on how much you listen to your empathy. If you empathize too much, it could ruin you mentally. Especially with how much the sadness there is in the world. First and foremost, you have to take care of yourself. Because you are stuck with yourself your entire life. Friends come and go. Everything comes and goes. Family, friends, pets, acquaintances, coworkers. You are stuck with yourself for your entire life. And I think it's very important to eventually begin to choose yourself over others. Even if sometimes you may be perceived as selfish, you have to do things for yourself. I make these videos for myself. I don't make these videos for anybody else but me, but I share them because I think people will enjoy them. That doesn't make me selfish because I made it for myself. This whole episode is more about the idea of choosing to do something for yourself, but also recognizing that you need to talk to the people around you when you choose to do something for yourself. Share in your excitement. Don't feel like you have to hide something that happens to you that might be good just because you think that it will affect them negatively. Yeah, it's possible that Lee and Mary Lee might be upset that Thomas couldn't be there. But if they're upset that he's taking an opportunity for himself that's only going to come once in a lifetime, then that's a separate problem entirely, because a true friend would not be upset like that. And that's my case on it. Thanks for listening to me talk about this episode for upwards of an hour. I really appreciate it. That kitty right there has been patient. She wants some food, so I'm gonna feed her, and I will see you guys in the next video. Leave all your ideas and thoughts down in the comments below. I'll be down in there responding and talking. I have a lot more things I'd like to say about this episode, but I'm gonna cut it here. This episode is heavy, and there's a lot of things to take from it, and I really hope that you watch this with some open eyes. If you had any issues with Deceit in it, kind of step into his shoes a little bit, the way Thomas and Patton talk about at the end. Look at it from Deceit's perspective, on the sense that Deceit is trying to make sure that Thomas is true to himself, which is not a problem. It's okay to be true to yourself. So I will see you guys in the next video. Good luck in everything you're striving for. And for those of you in school, I wish you luck with your finals and cramming. I know things are getting pretty hectic. I have a lot of friends that are in school. So good luck, guys. I wish you all the best. I know you can do it. So I will see you guys next time. So thanks for watching, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Peace out.